This is Cold Start. Hey, Silas, where do mechanics come from?
The mechanics factory?
I was thinking it was the mechanics stork. They bring mechanics all ready to go. They have all the knowledge out of the box. Isn't that how that works?
Yeah, born and bred from the garage, straight away, straight
Yeah.
out.
They have that gene, right? It's like the grease monkey gene or whatever it is.
Gasoline in their veins.
The tattoo of the H pattern on the inside of their wrist. That's how you know a mechanic, right? Like when you're out and about in the world and you see that guy with the H pattern on the inside of his wrist.
Yeah, I feel like most people that are mechanics are like diehard mechanics. They always feel like they're born to do that job.
Yeah, they're just sort of, their environment that they come up in is led them in that direction. They're always going to be a mechanic. They kind of always knew it. People don't seem to fall into it too much.
No, and I feel like it's one of those jobs that just like fits the personality, fits that sort of mindset of loving to tinker with things. It's usually the kids that took stuff apart as a child.
Yeah.
And then they had to figure out how to put it back together. Sometimes successful more than others.
I was one of those kids. One time I took the doorknob off of our door that went down into the basement, and I guess the door was somehow locked such that they couldn't get the door open again after it was disassembled.
So you were good at the disassembling part, hadn't figured the reassembly piece just yet.
I guess that's why I'm a driver and not a mechanic, huh? I'm better at breaking stuff.
See, and I've always been like that too, of like even being involved in the motorsport industry for so long, like I would never classify myself as like the mechanically inclined individual. It's like I'd rather get behind the wheel and drive, and only understanding parts and bits of cars and what they do just for the simple sense of understanding how that affects the way that the car drives.
Yeah, I always felt like I didn't really totally understand what was happening. I thought I conceptually knew, but I didn't actually know. And I never would have trusted myself to do my own brake job or something like that. I'd be deathly afraid what the result would be. I have to do this. I have to turn this over to somebody who's trained in this area.
Yeah, so speaking of, mechanics, becoming a mechanic, this side of the industry that is so prevalent within the automotive realm, because yes, automotive enthusiasts, we have cars, they break, things happen. We have to get them fixed. We have to send them to someone for them to get fixed. So it is a huge part of the ecosystem in regards to being into cars, is not necessarily 100% knowing how to fix it yourself, but like there has to be those individuals keeping these things on the road. And I heard when I was out of town, busy with some other things, that you had the chance to sit down with a good friend to go over what it means to be a mechanic, how to become a mechanic, and maybe getting into how that translates into the motorsports realm of becoming a motorsports mechanic.
We had this great conversation about like, hey, how did you get into being a mechanic to start out? And is that something you always wanted to be? And turned out it was a much more surprising path than I expected. My friend Mike hadn't started out wanting to be a mechanic. He wanted to go to art school, and he kind of fell into this thing. And it seems like such a different domain. How could you possibly transition from one to the other? But it's really just a set of skills that people learn, and techniques and concepts. And once you have those things in mind, a lot of the things you need to work in a job are the same, independent of the specific technical knowledge that you need.
Well, rather than two individuals that are admittedly not mechanically inclined talk about the industry of mechanics and motorsports and where it's at currently, let's dive into that interview that you had with Mike when he was out here visiting on the West Coast and learn a little bit more about it.
Yeah, there's a lot of good insight to be had, so let's go ahead and turn it over and we'll hear more about that. I'd like to introduce you to my friend, experienced automotive mechanic and architect of a motorsports mechanic training program in progress, Mike Whitcraft.
Hi, that's me.
That's you, man.
Can you tell I haven't done this before?
That's okay.
Thanks for letting me join you here.
Yeah, thanks for visiting us. You're here from the Midwest, from St. Louis?
Yep, flew halfway across the country to come hang out with you.
Well, thanks for being here with us in this fair area of Northern California. You came at a really interesting time here at Sonoma Raceway. They're getting ready for some big events coming up soon, and there's always exciting stuff to see around here. Part of what makes this place so special is this ecosystem of all the businesses and people coming and going here all the time. What's sort of your impression of this place, having seen it for the first time just in the last 2 days?
There is a cool buzz about the place for sure. It's a unique environment that it's hard to duplicate back home. I've been to racetracks, but the community surrounding racetracks is something I've got to see here. Lots of cool stuff coming into town for the event, that's for sure.
Yeah. Have you seen this sort of community of businesses and sort of the sphere around the racetrack in other places? Because out on the West Coast, this doesn't really exist very much.
You know, it's interesting because like St. Louis is a B list, I guess we'll call it. We are so close to Indianapolis that everybody just goes there. This environment would exist there in spades. I mean, motorsport capital of the world. But in my backyard, it's a little more low key. You get people come around for events, the teams come in for events. But what I've seen here, honestly, I haven't really seen duplicated anywhere else.
That's super cool. My impression is that, back in Indianapolis, North Carolina, maybe, that hour outside of London where all the Formula One teams kind of set up, like there is this place where there's a concentration of people thinking about cars, racing, motorsports, the behind the scenes of what it takes to make all of those things happen, right? Not just the administration, but the technical details, the data analysis, the fabrication, the machining. There's a lot of things that are happening all there, but it is a really unusual thing, and it is in very few places around the world where there's such a concentration. And I've heard stories about, for example, NASCAR teams have a lot of teams based in Charlotte or around Charlotte, North Carolina, and guys literally able to walk across the street to get a different job.
Yeah, I've heard the same. It's an interesting community, I guess, that I won't pretend to have been to every racetrack in the world. I would imagine that something like what I've been seeing the last couple of days exists in a handful of places, but it feels so unique, so special that they can't possibly be everywhere,
Yeah, it seems like they're not building any more of these.
No.
Right? This is sort of a relic of times past. And maybe that is appropriate given, racing has a history and things have evolved over time. Technologically, things have changed quite a bit since early days of racing. We've talked about some of those early Le Mans races and GT races and things like that. Safety has changed a lot. The expectations about what a racetrack is, how family-friendly it might be, the facility itself, even what a driver is expected to know about their car. You think about people who show up to the track to drive and they do their track day and generally go find their mechanic shop to give them an inspection or look over their car because people don't have the kind of experience working on cars to be able to do that themselves by and large.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And so something we think a lot about is what's going to be the way the next group of people, the next crop of kids coming up who want to be car enthusiasts, who want to noodle with their cars and get into this activity. Like, how are they going to find their way? Are there icons that they can emulate? Are there people that they can look back to in history for representation of the all-around knowledge of what a car is, how it works, how to put it together, how to take it apart? I kind of think back to the old days of racing. There was that time in the 80s when A.J. Foyt was in the Indy 500 and something happened to his car and he gets out, he gets into pit lane, he got out of his car and is literally like banging on his car with a hammer, right? And maybe that's an extreme example, but Bruce McLaren, right, was a car designer and engineer as much as he was the driver and racer for his own team. So there was this history of people who had that all-around set of skills, being a mechanic, being mechanically inclined, even to the point of knowing how to engineer or design a car, as well as how to maintain and manage them. What do you see in terms of the kinds of experience around the mechanics you've worked with or in the automotive environment you've been in that sort of parallels that, or do you think that's something that we've lost?
Well, the era of fixing your car with a hammer, I think, is long gone. There was an art, I suppose, to cars that has been traded for technical documentation and computers and sifting through data sets. Yeah. Fixing cars in general is a very different landscape than what I think a lot of people maybe think of, You might grow up in the driveway fixing cars with mom or dad or grandpa or whoever was mechanically inclined around you. That is more of a hobbyist level at this point. If you want to do it professionally, it's a very different thing. Yeah. And in the world of motorsport, I would imagine it has changed every bit as much, if not more.
Yeah, I mean, even in regular passenger cars, family cars, I hear less and less about kids working with mom or dad or grandpa or grandma or whoever in the garage, learning about maintaining a car because modern cars generally don't require that kind of upkeep.
Yeah. Not only has the maintenance been different, actually repairing them is kind of unattainable for a lot of people. The equipment required to even get the information you need is dealership OEM level multi-$1,000 diagnostic tools that I don't know about you, but I don't have one of those in my garage.
Yeah, I mean, that's become part of this trend, right, where manufacturers are making it harder and harder to get inside these things. Yeah. They want you to buy the service plan. They want you to have the subscription to them so that they can continue to control and manage the thing like a black box.
Yeah.
So what do we do when we look at something like motorsport, where it really requires this knowledge of internals to be effective, either as a driver or as a member of the team, whether you're a crew chief or a mechanic on the team or what have you? There's this integration of all of these different types of systems and disciplines that make up what racing is. And I think a lot of people who get into cars are interested in racing but don't quite know how to get there, or don't know what kind of skills they might need to be involved in it. Like, not everybody's going to be a race car driver, and like we've talked about before, neither of us had the right last name or $1 million in the bank to go be a racer coming up. But for those who want to be involved with this stuff, there are other paths, right? So there are ways to be involved with this area other than just being the driver in the car. And so from your experience, having worked on a lot of cars, what do you see in terms of the enthusiasts and maybe the people who are more passionate about those cars? And do you see a connection with their knowledge of and the sort of work that they're doing on their cars, and how that extends out to the potential of them applying that in a performance space or in some kind of recreational way other than driving a commuter car on the street to and from your job?
We all have to start somewhere in our passions, and I think the biggest place that motorsport and maybe OEM repair overlap would be in the fundamentals. How a car operates generally is universally unchanged. The form factor of a race car and someone's minivan is two very different things.
Sure.
But it's an internal combustion engine, four wheels, tires, suspension, all that stuff. I think where people maybe go astray without even realizing it is there is a point at which the OEM repair and diagnostic industry and the motorsport industry pretty heavily diverge.
I see.
One path is well trodden with lots of resources, lots of advice, lots of people coming around to your school telling you how to go be a mechanic. The other one, not so much.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that a little, because that's an interesting space, right? Because if it's a little amorphous, it probably allows for people from different walks or backgrounds to get involved. I've heard a lot of sort of creative approaches to problem solving in the motorsports space that weren't that somebody learned how to wrench on a car specifically for that manufacturer, or that they had a very specific skill set. It's the fact that they knew a little bit about a lot of different things. And that's something I'm not sure how you go about sort of investing in or inculcating into somebody new. Like, the number of systems that exist in cars today is wildly greater than what it used to be. How they work, and to your point, the diagnostics, the computer diag that's happening there to tell us what's wrong takes away some of the hands-on knowledge that we needed previously to do that sort of problem solving. And in fact, it took it away from us to the point where we're not even allowed to touch those kind of systems or gain access to that kind of information anymore. So what's a way by which you would think about, if you were going to try to bring more people into this space, what are the areas and skill sets that you think are important? And what are those things that you see that diverge between sort of the OEM path and that motorsports path?
Oh, sure. I think being a diagnostic technician, we'll just kind of blanket statement, is not the job most people think it is. The training that exists is very specialized training for effectively very specialized road vehicles. All the proprietary IPs and software and all of this stuff requires training to be able to use effectively if you were going to say go be a tech at a dealer.
Right.
It is not in your driveway wrenching on stuff. Yeah, there are tools involved, but the training mirrors the job, and the job is not really what it used to be. And so it becomes so specialized and bespoke, if you will, that it diverges pretty heavily into what most people would consider generic technician stuff. When people think, I want to be a mechanic, they are thinking of the fundamentals. They are thinking of taking parts on and off, and that hasn't gone away. But the real meat and potatoes of the job is not, can you take a wheel off? Can you take an engine out? That would be considered a mid-tier level of skill in the world of diagnostic technicians.
Sure enough.
So I think going back to how the two things overlap is really the fundamentals are important, regardless of the direction you go. But if, let's say, there were to be motorsport training schools like there are automotive training schools, it would be a very specialized training program to meet the needs of a very different ecosystem, a very different industry.
Yeah, well, there's definitely need. Like, one of the things I hear around the racetrack here from all different types of race teams and shops and just enthusiasts is that we can't find good mechanics.
Yeah.
We just don't know where to look. They're not being made anymore. It's because that training is so specialized in the manufacturer diag space, such that people are learning the one way. Like how you diagnose your Toyota using the Toyota computer and the Toyota tools might be completely different than over here at Ford, right? So I think about this as how do we create these bases of important information for people to get some experience with, and what are the paces you can put people through to give them the sort of experience that will help them learn that kind of stuff.
No, I think it requires a very specific solution. It requires training written for these different jobs. And, I don't have an extensive background in motorsport. I know enough to be dangerous, we'll say.
Yeah.
But I have learned that it is a very eclectic set of skills that would otherwise in other industries be completely unrelated to each other, which I think is fascinating. But it poses a challenge when you're training somebody. How do you bring all of that under one umbrella?
Right.
And the way schools have gone about it, training programs have gone about it, is trying to kind of do the best of both worlds, and I'm seeing that it's not working so good.
Yeah.
It really requires very specific training in a bunch of different directions, we'll just say, and then time to just kind of reinforce the skills that maybe a student would speak to their passions.
Yeah. What are those general areas? Like I could think of very specific things like, knowing how a transmission and a gearbox work and the internals of it. But that's really in deep details, right? At the higher level, cars operate a certain way, rely on certain systems. Things are working or aren't working. We have methods and tools for determining these things. What's that sort of sweet spot, if you will? Like I know that people come from a lot of different walks into this space, but what are the couple of major skills that you would be looking for from somebody? Or if somebody was listening to this thinking, maybe someday working on a car for a race team would be a fun thing to do, but I don't even know where to start with that. And maybe there's a school or maybe there's not. Maybe I just want to go and learn on my own. Like what are the things that are good bases of knowledge to have that would maybe give you a leg up over another candidate?
Boy, that's a loaded question. It plays into a bunch of different conversations about how to train somebody to do what we're describing. I think from what I get, and these will be other people's words, not so much mine, when I talk to race teams and hiring managers and stuff at fairly high levels of competition, they are used to not having a hiring pool of specifically trained people. And so what they look for, which are valid traits regardless, good work ethic, a passion for it, in some cases a willingness to live the lifestyle. It is almost less about technical skills, but I think that's almost out of necessity, not desire. It's kind of you draw from the pool you're given. A lot of them trade employees around because they happen to have the technical skills and they've been proven, but getting someone new, that has been a challenge, which kind of leads to what we were talking about earlier, where there is a massive shortage of technicians, motorsport and otherwise.
Yeah, we see that all around. And, we, in a previous episode, had talked about how racing schools have kind of gone away and the way by which people gain experience or knowledge to go drive on a track or try to go do some club racing or something is just inherently different than it used to be. And there are still schools, they do exist. And, Silas and I both were of the opinion that that's a fine way to go and get experience from those who've been through it in a sort of an organized curriculum that was designed for this purpose. But there's lots of different ways people can come into this thing, and some of it is through more hobbyist or enthusiast sort of mechanisms, or just outside looking in. Hey, that looks like fun. Here's an angle or something I can connect myself to. Maybe it's design. People love the livery and the look of a race car, or they're all about the environment of being at a race and the feeling of being part of motorsports and large organized events. There's so many different parts of what bring together to make a race happen. Like you think of it from the perspective of being a spectator, and there's this place you go and they're putting on this big carnival event that day, and they happen to be featuring, instead of it being the circus, it's the racers that they brought into town, and they're going to drive really fast around the track, and we're going to watch them do that. So I think it's a matter of kind of spurring on the interest early for people that we're bringing them into this world with the idea that lots of different backgrounds and lots of different types of people are needed in this space. And I think that's something that maybe a lot of people don't realize, because it seems like such a specialized niche field to get into motorsports at all, to get into being a mechanic for a race team, for NASCAR, IMSA, IndyCar, places like that. but there's so much demand. And I think the things that I've heard about are aptitude and work ethic and things that aren't about knowing the diagnostic method for this specific subsystem
Yep.
or that manufacturer, right? So I think those are things that if people really kind of step back from what it is that they want to do and think about how that they're doing it, they can probably do some things for themselves, educate themselves, engage in behaviors that might align them more well with this sort of work in the future.
No, I think you actually brought up a really valid point that I think is probably worth really talking about, is that a lot of people overlook the fact that motorsport isn't just the cars. It's big business. It is a lot of different things. You can work in food service and work in motorsports.
That's right.
You can work in IT and work in motorsports. Every job a business would have, a race team at a certain level has to have.
Absolutely.
Social media, HR, management training. You can go to a variety of different degree programs and end up in motorsport. In fact, shameless plug for a moment, there's a group that I'm a part of called Path to the Pits, a wonderful group of people that they're doing exactly that, as they are taking people from all walks of life and just showing them that that job exists, which for a lot of people is the first hurdle. Getting to the racetrack and discovering what they could be in the future is just something that not everybody has the opportunity to do. So I'm honored to be a part of groups like that that feed, a greater need. You and I are talking about technical training,
Right.
which is kind of my wheelhouse. But there are groups out there that are taking the lead on just filling all of the jobs because they all exist just like they would anywhere else.
So Path to the Pits, how can I learn more about that?
Path to the Pits, the number 2. Easy Google search. They're not a mystery. I do not run it. It is my pleasure to be a part of it in any capacity that I can. But it is a really good program that is worth looking into if you just don't know what to do about your love of racing. You want to work in it. You don't know how. They have high-level access to put you in front of people that can tell you how the job really works and introduce you to jobs that you didn't know existed. It's a great group.
That's super cool. And what can the more, I'd say, currently passive but thinking about potentially pursuing a future in this space fans do? Do you need to be knowledgeable about like who's winning in the series now, what teams there are, what kind of machinery there is? Like, what are the sort of details that you would expect somebody to be curious about and knowledgeable about coming into something like this?
It's interesting because I think being a fan is one thing. You can love it, and it's just kind of this thing that you get by osmosis because you watch it enough that the terms and the functions of the teams and the things that are maybe important to them to win a race day, you kind of just pick up on after you watch it for a while.
Sure, yeah.
But I don't think it's a prerequisite to the job. Really, the biggest hurdle is just being the right person in the right place at the right time. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges for a lot of people because, the average person, when they go to a race, they're in the stands. The team is not. The team's at work. They're in the paddock. They're in the pits. They are there the week prior. But the fan shows up for a few hours, never crossed paths in a professional capacity with the teams,
Right.
and then they part ways. And it's not like that in other industries. You can get on Indeed and Glassdoor and you can go shake somebody's hand, but the only time that the average person and someone who has the job that they want, we'll just say motorsport mechanic, the only time they would ever cross paths, they're 200 yards apart from each other, and they're both
Right.
busy.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's like, how do you solve that problem, right? How do you get them in the same place at the same time?
Yeah. Would you say there's benefit to somebody who doesn't yet have the skills to be a motorsport mechanic, but thinks that that's something that looks interesting to me? How do I get around that? Like, how can I get exposed to that if I don't have my own connections to it? Is this an accessible place? Will they welcome me in if I just kind of show up and poke my head over the wall? Or like, how does that work?
Motorsport in the series that you can get anywhere near the teams is surprisingly accessible. And I think it's track dependent because layouts and logistics and all that play into it. But it's not like going to an NBA game and you don't go anywhere near the players and they make sure of it.
That's right.
It is really accessible. And anybody I've ever talked to, either from a fan perspective or professional capacity, they always are eager to talk to somebody who's interested in getting into it. I would say if you could get a paddock pass at a race, that would be a great place to start. Find somebody who's not busy.
Right.
Get them before race day. Practice day maybe would be a little bit better. Leave them alone on race day.
Yeah,
Leave
right,
them alone
right.
on race day. But practice days, prior pre-qualifying, stuff like that, when you see somebody kind of just hanging out and they have a uniform on, just say, hey, introduce yourself.
Right.
Tell them what you want to do because they will talk to you. In my experience, they will always talk to you if they are not busy, and you will just get information that would be very hard to get anywhere outside of, say, a formalized education.
Yeah, I mean, you're getting the raw feed from people living the life, doing it right then and there.
Yeah.
And you're getting to approach this and appreciate it from the point of view as a spectator. But the fact that it is so accessible to you, that you can go have that conversation with a coach, with a mechanic, with a tech, is pretty eye-opening. And I think I didn't have any idea about that until I started going to races. And
Same.
even at pretty high level. I mean, IMSA races, NASCAR races, before the race starts, the pits are open. You can go walk around and see the cars and get up close and personal and talk to people. And if they're not busy, they're pretty approachable.
Go to Battle on the Bricks in Indianapolis and walk the garages. They're all right there.
Yeah.
Just walk through them.
It's pretty special to have that sort of environment, And so I think that's something about motorsports that a lot of people really are fascinated by when they learn, is that it is really tight-knit. It is really close. There's lots of different jobs and environments in which people work, but when you hear about sort of that race team supporting the series, they're on the road with the cars and the drivers and the crew, and they form this really tight-knit bond. It's something unlike a lot of other work environments that I look at. Like corporate coworkers sharing cubicles don't have the same bond. They go home at the end of the day, and
You leave. Yeah.
they're not in it together, right? But you're talking about people who are spending days, weeks on end together, living, traveling, working, succeeding, failing, going through all of the highs and lows of being a human together in close proximity, trying to achieve something that is a real stretch for everybody involved. So there's stressors and tension involved in that kind of stuff. And at the same time, what an amazing environment that is when you're in that group of people where you feel like you've got your role to play and people know who you are and appreciate what you're about and are looking to you to play the role that you're there to do, or maybe go above and beyond that and do things that weren't expected from you because somebody's got to do it. And that's sort of the mindset of most motorsports teams that I've seen, is it's a little bit of all hands on deck.
Yeah, and I can only speak secondhand from talking to people that have done it, but every job is critical. If the tire pressure is wrong, that is a race winning or losing type of a function.
Yeah.
And so the culture fit of existing with these people, like you said, you don't clock out and go home. You're on the road driving across the country. You're working 16, 18, 20 hours. They see you at your worst and at your best.
Yeah.
So I'm told.
Right.
But yeah, it's a very different thing. It's a lifestyle that people live and they choose to live that is born of the passion of wanting to just go do this thing. And I think it maybe is another piece that not a lot of people realize when they say, I want to go work on race cars. It's not a thing that you just go clock out.
Right.
If it's race weekend, you live there.
Yeah.
That's just what it is.
Yeah, it's that kind of environment, right? It's survive or fail, trial of fire, right?
Yeah.
And there's a schedule to make, and you can't deviate from the schedule. The race is happening when it happens. You can't be late for the race. That's not acceptable, right? So it's, pretty high stakes in that way. I think it's pretty cool that, so coming from this background of having worked on cars and having exposure to seeing how people day to day are using their cars, to being part of this effort now to build a program to help create more motorsports mechanics. Can you tell me more about how this came about? What's your part in it? What are some of the goals or the vision that you have for this?
Yeah, there's a story there, I guess. I was that kid, when we talk about somebody who just doesn't know how to go do the thing that they want to do. You have an idea in your head. When I was 17, I had the idea in my head that I was going to go be a race car driver. Didn't work.
Yeah.
But the second one would have been attainable had I had the right tools, and that was to go work on race cars. Problem is when I was having that idea, it was pre-internet, so I had no idea who to talk to. But what's ironic is we have the collective knowledge of humanity in our pocket, and that's still a problem.
Yeah, that's right.
Who to go talk to is a hurdle for a lot of people. And so I've had a great long career in the OEM space. I've become a teacher for the last several years, and I've enjoyed it. I wouldn't change anything, but I never lost that passion for wanting to just go racing. You know, I will probably never live the lifestyle, but I would love to help somebody else go live that lifestyle. And so this This project is not a vanity project by any way, shape, or form. It is born out of a real industry need that has been well advertised to every single team I've talked to. But that problem exists where it is hard to figure out what that path is. It is not as crystal clear as it would be if you, say, wanted to go be an OEM repair technician.
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure the AI would have a really great answer if you said, how do I become a race mechanic now? Go.
It would tell you some stuff.
I'm sure it would.
It would sound like an answer.
Yeah, that's right. As you're kind of unfolding this vision, right, like what are some goals that you would have for the outcomes here? Like what is it that you want to have measurably accomplished at the end?
Now, I think there's kind of three parts to something successful. The technical skills are important. There's really no way around that. You do have to kind of have an understanding what the job is.
So that's building in the students the knowledge that they know, that well-rounded knowledge of automotive and cars.
And it's that unique side of things that is very separate from what the OEM would need. There are the fundamentals that they share, like I talked about earlier, but then there's the very different set of skills that do not overlap in the OEM repair space. So they would have to have some understanding of the different technologies involved that they would potentially be interacting with. Then there's the work ethic thing. And, can't be late to the race. You can't be late to work. You gotta want it. You gotta want to live the lifestyle. You gotta do the culture fit. You have to be employable. And then the third one is the connection. When I talked about how fans and the teams are rarely in the same place at the same time, I think to at least some capacity, a good program that would get somebody a career, the onus is on them to make that first connection. Give them the opportunity to be the right person in the right place at the right time.
Right.
So I think those three things are pretty major, and some of them are easier to do than others.
Yeah. What's the kind of backyard venues that people could be looking to? There's not world-famous racetracks in all geographies, but there are quite a few racetracks around. And is there an opportunity for people to be involved? We talk a lot about at the top levels of racing. But there's an awful lot of club racing going on. I see NASA and SCCA and Radical Cup and all these other groups, affiliations out there. They're putting on a lot more racing than just IMSA, IndyCar, NASCAR that we always talk about. So I have to imagine there's a huge amount of opportunity at that level as well.
Oh, absolutely. It's easy to focus on the stuff that's widely televised, and admittedly, that's where the highest saturation of jobs are at, but it is not the only ones. You're absolutely right. When you get into more grassroots efforts, there are tracks all over the friggin' place. I mean, go to your local drag strip.
Right.
They're not as far as you think they might be. Parking lots, the club that puts on an autocross event, just go to the dang thing. Talk to the people that are doing that, because I can almost guarantee you somebody there has a connection to the next level. They're doing this in some other capacity in autocross day as practice, but that applies to everything. I mean, local drag strips, road course events, dirt course events. You can go out in the middle of the woods and find a rally race. I mean, it is happening everywhere. There's just not always TV cameras, and I think that's maybe where the magic of the internet is helpful, because that landscape and that culture looks a little different in every part of the country. So you just have to figure out what's near you.
Yeah. And I think for some people, there are aspects of the motorsport job space that look really exciting, but maybe part of the lifestyle isn't as attractive. Like, not everybody wants to be on the road 40 weeks a year.
Yeah.
But almost every one of these teams that has the away team has the home team as well.
Yep.
And so I think there's opportunities there. And in addition to what you're talking about, the local opportunities, the things that might not be the household name, but are meaningful parts of this motorsports industry that we all participate in. And one of the things that I've seen and learned a lot from is pay attention to the names on the sides of the trailers and the sides of the cars. People show up with arrive and drives or racing support. All of those people are in this industry and are offering services or products to consumers of those people who want to go drive on track or go race. So I think that's an opportunity that exists in a lot more places than maybe we give credit to.
No, I would agree. The supplemental businesses that serve motorsports that are closely adjacent, that's a whole conversation in itself, because all those unique skills that you would maybe need to go be a race mechanic, there's whole career paths in each one of those directions, depending on how far you want to take them.
Sure.
And like you said, the kind of the home base, that's all over the place. You don't necessarily have to travel.
That's right. And you've mentioned a couple times sort of the fundamentals that people would need to get into this space. Could you maybe expand a little bit on what are those domains? And the reason I'm asking this is everybody can't know everything. We know that going in. So if I'm interested in this, I'm looking for a focus area that I'm not going to try to be the most world's expert in, but just so I can touch a few things, dabble in a few areas that'll give me a sense of what this thing is about and maybe if I'm the right candidate to go further.
It's interesting because the fundamentals at the level you would need to just get started, I think, are readily available. It's a wide range.
I mean, people don't need like advanced physics.
No,
Let's make that
yeah.
clear.
I guess if we were to quantify this, if you are going to be able to work on your own car,
Yes.
if you are mechanically inclined, if you're a lifelong learner, did you play with Legos as a kid? You like taking stuff apart? Are you curious about how things are built? I think that's a really good start. That's an indicator that maybe your brain kind of works in a way that would lend itself well to a technical career.
Yeah.
Not
You
just
like
cars, but a
problem
technical
solver.
career. Problem solver. I think if you like science, if you like the process of figuring out how to accomplish something, how to solve a problem using a process, like you said, that level of thinking, that type of thinking, I think is a really good fit for what I've seen in motorsport. The differences between automotive and motorsport is race cars are just this big fancy science experiment. If you like doing science experiments, you'll probably fit pretty well in with a team.
Yeah, pushing everything to its
yeah.
extreme, right? Finding where the limits are of performance and reliability and efficiency and all those
Yeah.
kinds of things.
But if you're a tinkerer, it's not to say that, like you said, you have to be this master at any one thing before you can even start on your career to motorsport. I think there's a lot that can be learned. There's online resources that are available, paid and unpaid. I'm shameless plug again. I'm a fan of HB Academy. I think they have a really good set of fundamentals to get people started. They're very good at what they do. Stuff like that, they're not the only ones. There are resources like that if you want to get started, spend your free time getting started. Go just look it up.
I think there's a lot of free information that's easily overlooked. And then there's trade organizations and others who put information out because it's in their interest to gain training for future hires or people who would be involved in those spaces to do that. Ultimately, there are the soft skills that you can't always teach to people, like work ethic. Yeah, you can teach that to people, but take as read or as given somebody's actually interested in looking for work or involvement in some way.
Yeah.
And how to gain the experience necessary when, not everybody can afford to go jump in a race car or arrive and drive track day kind of a thing. But there are other venues. So I wonder about, what about the kid at home on the sim racing rig, right? They're on iRacing and they're out there and they're starting to play around with car setup. They're starting to learn about what happens if you change brake bias and tire pressures and what happens with hot tires versus cold tires. And do you think that's relevant here? Do you think that's the kind of spark and interest that would also lead somebody into a path that could be successful here?
I think it definitely could be a spark. I don't have personal experience on how much it translates to doing it on a car. The terminology, the adjustments, and all those things are one-to-one. I definitely think that there's probably more to that science experiment that they do in real life than you could potentially do in a game. But I think you're absolutely right. I think that spark has to come from somewhere. So if you're sitting there and you're endlessly poring over the perfect setup to make your car set the lap record on a specific track, your head's in the right space.
Right. That's awesome. And I think there's a lot of people who are out there doing that kind of thing, feeling like, is this useful for anything? Like, am I learning something that's applicable elsewhere? And sure, maybe you could get dropped into a race car and go drive it, but very few people actually get that opportunity. But there's way more demand for the people who are in these affiliated roles who are around this activity to have that knowledge so they can apply these other skills in a way that's useful and relevant.
Yeah, and I think that's a valid point. The driver is the one that gets a lot of camera time. It's the one that is advertised. That's the celebrity.
Right.
But for every driver, there's 2, 5, 10, 100 people that support that program.
Absolutely.
To put that driver on pole, And that's where all the jobs are. That's where the technical skills come in. So, yeah, if you're on the sim, if you're the guy in iRacing that I cannot possibly chase down because you've spent time setting up your car, that is a good start to just get your head in that space and then put yourself out there to maybe take it to the next level. Find the online resources, find a school, find some way to get the actual job and turn your hobby that you're passionate about into something you can get a paycheck for.
Right. Can you imagine the difference in these conversations, right? You're a young person, you roll up to a race. Let's say there's an IMSA race not too far from you, and you get to the pit wall and you see some people sitting at the screen, on pit lane. They're in their pit cart. They're doing some kind of sciencey data analysis-y
squiggly
looking
lines.
things, looking at squiggly lines. And here I am. I'm coming up. I've used iRacing and I've made some changes. And I realize that, hey, when my car gets understeery, pushing in the front, I can make adjustments to my front anti-roll bar, and that will allow me to manage this condition that I'm having and have some effect on it. And I can do some experimental trial and error in iRacing to know if that works, so that now I can walk up to the pit lane and ask this guy and go, hey, I do iRacing a lot, and I find that when there's understeer, I can adjust my anti-roll bar this way, and that helps to deal with this problem. And right away, you're revealing such a level of knowledge to these people that you're just having a friendly conversation with about what you've actually learned and taken away from this fun thing that you're doing just to have experienced, racing online with friends, but you're actually applying knowledge in a way that can be directly related to the real world of racing on a racetrack.
I think there's enough that translates there, and there's a whole different conversation. I think it might have been a previous episode about the validity of sim racing being a gateway into actual racing.
For sure.
But yeah, I think there's a lot of value of understanding the conversation that you're in. Being able to go have an intelligent conversation with somebody that has the job you want, for example. Know what the heck they're saying, I can't imagine a scenario in which I would take my iRacing experience and go make setup suggestions to the guy on pit wall. He'd probably look at me and tell me to go away. But if I asked him, maybe, what are they doing for setup on this particular track? And he answered me.
Yeah.
And to know what they're talking about, that is a huge leg up.
Yeah, I think it's almost knowing how to have the conversation, right? Not asserting expertise from a lack of it. Not like, oh, I did this on the sim, so I'm an expert and I know.
Yeah, with
because
the Dunning-Kruger effect.
We've had that happen before. We've had people show up to track days and talk about how they would do a thing on slick tires, and then it revealed that they've never driven on slick tires, only in the sim racing before. But be that as it may, I think there is definitely relevant experience where you could show curiosity, you could show interest to somebody who is an expert in the field by saying, hey, I think I understand this thing. Is that true? Versus you should do a thing because I know better than you.
Yeah. No, and I think those are valid conversations to have, and it kind of goes back to when I said walk through the paddock and find somebody that's not doing anything. If you can have an intelligent conversation at any level with somebody who's doing that job, it's a very engaging kind of thing, and it does, like you said, prove your interest in the whole thing.
Yeah.
That's not to say that they're going to offer you a job on the spot. That's a thing that I don't know if it happens that much anymore, but it is a step in the right direction. You move the needle towards that job you want. You have 20 of those conversations, and you don't know what can come from any one of them.
Yeah, and that's how these situations develop. That's how these relationships come together. And the thing I keep hearing over and over again is this is a small industry, and people know each other. And
everybody knows each other.
That's how people get hired, And so you had a spark early on. You wanted to go into racing. And so what are the kind of cars you like? What got you interested in this to start out?
I have a sickness. I'm a rotary nerd. I don't know if it's just because I hate hate myself or love the struggle or both. It is a interesting platform. So in college, I played with those a lot, and I had these dreams of turning my RX-7, an FC, not the cool one, the FC, turning it into a race car, and I spent all my time and money just keeping the dang thing running so I could get back and forth to school. But 90s JDM, I almost hate to say it, Fast and the Furious came out about the time in my formative years, and that had a distinct effect.
What car from Fast and the Furious?
The orange one, the Supra.
The Supra, okay.
Yeah, I'm not original in that sense. I'm with everybody else that watched that movie. Then again, there's probably people that love the muscle car.
That kind of pop culture stuff is another thing that brings us all together as fans of this space and of cars in general,
At the same time, I was getting the cheap Logitech racing wheel on the original Gran Turismo. And I think that has probably been a big part of what has led me to honestly sitting in this room in one way. Just feeling like I could get better at doing that. And it was a thing that almost felt attainable because I would get good at it in the game.
Yeah.
But it also made me fall in love with just the history of race cars and all these iconic cars that I've had the absolute privilege of seeing a couple of them in person. That was definitely something that kind of set me on that path of loving racing and definitely influenced my desire early on to pursue that career.
That's super cool. And who taught you what you know about cars?
I kind of ventured off onto my own. I didn't have the right last name. My family was not into racing. My family was not particularly mechanically inclined. I don't know where the heck I got it from. I had a lot of Lego sets.
Yeah.
And so I just decided that was a thing. It was my second try. My first one was art school. Failed that almost immediately. Wrong side of the brain.
Pretty different. I was going to say, these are pretty different pursuits, right?
Pretty different. There's a creative streak in my family, but I did not go that far. It turned into just this, really an evolution of taking stuff apart, putting it back together. Very technical, very curious. And so I wanted to just work on cars, originally race cars.
Right on.
But the road cars, there was a path there. It wasn't hard to find. So I followed that one. I did a 2-year degree, got my associates in automotive technology, and then started working at local shops and stuff and just kind of getting experience, figuring out the right and the wrong way to do things.
Sure.
Then I moved up and I worked at some dealers, worked for some OEMs, and now most of my career was with one OEM. I worked for Toyota for a long time, great company. I got a lot of the knowledge that almost in a secondhand kind of way doesn't help me be a better motorsport mechanic, but it gives me a really solid point of comparison to understand the differences. And it's a weird sentence. It's a weird sentence. Part of the reason that I've gone so far into trying to make this thing, and I'm not alone. There's a team of people building this. But
Yeah, just to be clear, you're part of an institution that's building up this program, but still work in progress, something that's planning to launch down the road.
Yeah. In concept, we are making something that serves the needs that we've been talking about for this whole episode. It's to solve 17-year-old Mike's problem.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of you out there, quite a bit.
But it's weird because I've not grown up in motorsport. I have a perspective that maybe a lot of people don't share that would maybe naturally gravitate towards making a motorsport program. I have extensive experience in the opposite direction.
Right.
And so there's a context there. So that has almost kind of led me to this very roundabout kind of way of getting back into motorsport again. A fact that 17-year-old me is very happy about.
That's super cool. Is there anything else you want to leave people with, or sentiments about this space that you want to instill or inspire in somebody who's thinking about pursuing a career in mechanics, whether it's for motorsport or automotive or something completely unrelated?
Yeah, I think we've talked around it. There's training programs. I would absolutely say start by just finding what you can for free to gauge your interest, your dedication, your aptitude in some ways. But there's a level beyond that would be very beneficial to somebody that is actively pursuing a career in motorsport. And there's schools that exist. There's a program that I'm working on that is coming, and it will be very beneficial to people that are trying to get into that space. And it's just kind of, what's your appetite? How far do you want to take it? Do you want to pay to go to school, or do you want to pay to get race tickets and go talk to people in the paddock? It's a winding path, is a thing that's been told to me, and it's a phrase that resonates. There are so many different ways. If you want to get a hands-on career in motorsport, you could do it. A lot of people have done it. In fact, the only people doing it are just kind of getting into it, worming their way into it any way they can. You know who you know, a friend of a friend. I hear a lot of those stories. But there is a more formalized path that does exist. There are some schools that exist, and there will be more. The program that I'm working on, it will be something to help people that just don't understand how to get that job they have in their head and what skills are required. A school is a place that they show you all that stuff, and a good school makes that connection for you.
Yeah, that's amazing. I just talked to some of my neighbors here at Sonoma Raceway, the other businesses, race teams that are operating here at the racetrack in this ecosystem, and they all light up when we talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
They're like, wait, you're making more of these mechanics that are like impossible to find, and we don't even know where to go to get, so can you connect with me? Can you send them my way? I think it's really exciting. And so as somebody building a school, a program as part of a school, having that off-ramp and those connections into industry, that puts you in like the guidance and placement kind of space as well, thinking about where are people going to land? Where do you want to see them land? How can you help them? And what is it that you can do for them to help them beyond what they can do for themselves?
Yeah. I think it goes all the way back to the early part of the conversation where there's 3 parts to a successful program, and that connecting them with the people who actually have a job to offer them, that is something that's incredibly important. You could have somebody that is technically inclined and just never ends up talking to the right person. And I think that is a crime of a school to not be able to provide at least an opportunity to the students that are showing the initiative and want it. And I have the pleasure of one of the many hats that I wear in the creation of this thing. I have the pleasure of talking to a lot of enthusiastic people in the motorsport industry that sound like the best kind of broken record. They all say, please
Yes.
make more motorsport mechanics.
That's amazing. Well, this has been a really fun conversation. Thanks for being here, Mike.
Thanks, Todd.
Really appreciate you, man. Hey, and thanks for listening. This has been Cold Start.